My friend Kurt, welcome to Battleground, man. Thanks so much for joining me.
Hey, thanks for having me. Let me adjust.
Of course.
Hold on. There we go. That's the professionalism I'm known for.
You've also got palm trees in the background. You're in the beautiful state of California, right? Communist California, but you're still there.
Yeah, it's a little overcast today, but I'll live.
So I'm sure you've seen the news cycle today, Kurt. You know, Tucker Carlson out, Joe Biden is in for president. What the hell is going on in America right now? Like, I know that's a big question, but like,
are we FCC compliant? I mean, everything's ridiculous and weird. I'm still trying to figure out the Tucker Carlson thing I'm going to write about in my Thursday town hall column. If you strike down Tucker Carlson, he'll become more powerful than you can ever imagine. That's my shout out for the Star Wars virgin nerds. Yeah, I don't know. I don't exactly know what's going on there, except Fox thinks they're better off without him than with him, which I'm not sure. I see how that works.
Yeah,
and I've watched a lot of Succession.
Yeah, well, so you're basically an expert.
Yeah, I should know everything. I'm just waiting for Lachlan Murdoch to bust out his own special rap to Rupert, which will be little deep cut for Succession fans. And speaking of Succession, I wonder who's going to take over for Joe Biden, because I don't see him. I don't see him completing the second term.
I don't either. I mean, he's in his 80s and he seems a heck of a lot older than that. But yet competence, or even, any basic semblance of cognitive ability, Kurt, is really not a requirement for a Democratic candidate. In fact,
well, clearly not.
In fact, Kurt, like, they basically rigged the whole process. Their whole primary process prohibits somebody, like any sort of outsider, from rising with their concept of super delegates. And now we heard, like, on the news that the Democratic Party is not going to debate at all. So they're not going to allow anyone to debate Joe Biden, which I guess, I mean, is smart, because he can barely form a coherent thought as it is. But like, what never ceases to amaze me, Kurt, is I watched Joe Biden's announcement for president, which is basically like a movie trailer and him reading off a script. For all we know, it could be AI, it might not even be him. But I don't. They continue to trot out the same old stuff, like the Democrats, how they're fighting for the working man, and while Republicans just want tax cuts for the wealthy, and all they do is divide people among race, creed, religion, rich, poor. I can't believe people keep falling for it, man.
Well, look, it's a transactional relationship. They get stuff out of them. Rich people get richer. Deadbeats get free money, and sexually frustrated and lonely Chardonnay drinking wine women get to take out their personal psychopathologies on normal people.
So,
I mean, it works for them.
So what do Republicans have to do looking forward to 2024 to win? Do they have a chance? I see you talk on Twitter all the time about how winning is everything. Like, you don't really...
Yeah, I'm completely ruthless. You're an Army officer too. You know that the S1 provides a casualty estimate before every battle. I know how many guys are going to get hurt. I know how many are going to get killed. And then you do the mission anyway, and you don't get sentimental about it, even if, at least not while you're in the process of doing it. I look at politics the same way. I'm completely indifferent to what the politician wants. The only thing I care about is winning. That's the only thing I care about. So when I see things like Donald Trump saying, you need to be loyal to me, no. Loyalty goes from you to me. You don't get loyalty from me. This is a transactional relationship. What have you done for me lately? The only thing I care about for your past performance is it may be an indicator of future success, or it may not be. But other than that, if Donald Trump's dreams are ruined and the election that he lost is not redeemed in 2024, I'm utterly indifferent to it. I simply don't care. Same with Ron DeSantis. Obviously he wants to be president. If his dreams are shattered, that's too bad. I'm interested in winning.
So
my entire test is what wins.
I,
Who is the person most likely to win?
So I'm fascinated by that. And again, like I see you talking about this all the time on Twitter. And yes, you are a savage. But oftentimes, you're right. I agree with you, Kurt. And, when I first got in and ran for Congress in 2020, I met with lots of very interesting, cool people. And the concept of the gentleman loser in the Republican Party came up with really the base and the donor class that were sick of just super nice Republicans with a great bio. I don't want to name names, but Mitt Romney, John McCain, who, by the way, John McCain, I disagree with John McCain on I think lots of things, and disagree with some of his votes in the Senate at the tail end of his tenure there, but had a great bio, ran for president, was super nice, got walloped. Same thing with Mitt Romney. And my sense was, Kurt, that the donors are just sick and tired of, people that are nice, have good bios, but lose. Exactly.
Yeah, I'm not here to lose. And the simple fact is we've had 3 cycles since 2016. 2016 was a miracle. Mm-hmm. We lost in 18, we lost in 20, we lost in 22. And, the Republican establishment doesn't seem to want to get it. Donald Trump doesn't seem to want to get it. I mean, I watched his chief of staff whipping votes for Ronna McDaniel at the Republican convention. People were, Trump wasn't backing Ronna. I watched her. These eyes watching her do it. Don't tell me what I saw or didn't see, because I saw it. So, I think more Republicans ought to be cold-blooded, but I don't think they are. I think a lot of, you can be rewarded for being soft. Look at Lindsey Graham, the gentleman who helps get Democrat nominees through a Judiciary Committee. He gets pulled up on stage by Trump. What the hell's that? I'm tired of conservatives who aren't interested in succeeding. I mean, for God's sake, look at the Bud Light thing. We've done tremendous damage to them after they basically, pushed our face in a trough of crappy beer. And we've done tremendous damage to it. And there are a bunch of Republicans going, but they donate to us. We have to slow down. Okay, that's loser talk. And the entire base, from donor to individual, is sick of losing.
They are. And Kurt, like the number one thing that I saw on the campaign trail, I mean, everywhere that I went was they wanted someone who was willing to fight. And to your point about Bud Light, the idea that we would take pressure off now, right? When we've got them on the ropes, and we might win one cultural fight, just one cultural victory, and a long line of losses. And then sure enough, like right before we cross the finish line, right before we deliver a fatal blow, we stop, right?
There's a couple problems. First, there are the intellectual conservatives who don't get anywhere by winning. They get anywhere by existing. And they exist in that, the Jonah Goldbergs, the David Frenches, the rest of these losers. They're a bunch of mediocrities with nothing outside of their limited notoriety for existing. I mean, they've never conserved anything, and they're always there to try and tear down the folks who do. They are the Republic. Like in school, right? There were hot chicks, and they inevitably had a fat and ugly girlfriend who did everything she could to make sure you didn't score with a hot one. I mean, anything she could do. That's who they are. That's Jonah Goldberg. He's the fat chick.
Kurt, you have and anyone that's ever read your town hall columns, by the way, knows this, but you really do truly have a way with words.
Well, I like vibrant imagery. Look, I mean, so you got those guys, and remember, they're living out their personal psychodramas. They don't care about conservatism or anything else. That's just a pose that they have. I'm the conservative guy. I'll pretend to be conservative, but all my stuff comes from, it's like Jen Rubin. Yeah, I'm conservative. Also, abortion until the kid's 15. So they're kind of ridiculous. Then there are the old school gentleman conservatives, who drive the Buicks and they're well known in their small town. They're an upstanding citizen, and the last thing they want to do is throw a punch. And they are, these are the John Thunes, the Tom Tillises, the Mitt Romneys, uh, the guys who cover their personal weakness and lack of a spine by somehow trying to seize the moral high ground. And we're done with it. And Donald Trump is a huge repudiation of that. And if you look at the new guy, DeSantis, because I think it's a two-man race, DeSantis doesn't care either. He goes ahead and attacks Disney, which also freaks out a lot of the country. Disney gives us money. This is a terrible idea. Standing up to corporations? Why? I think a real test of Republicans is to understand who your enemies are. If you think Republicans are the party of big corporations, I'm not sure how I can help you. Every big corporation has the same politics as the 30-year-old second wife of the CEO. And he's just sitting there going, maybe if I start a diversity department, she'll shut up. Why can't she be like a normal wife and let me, open her up a purse shop somewhere to bide her time and say she's got to do this crap. I really don't understand why Republicans, treat corporations. We can't tell a private corporation what to do. Okay, so what you're telling me is a private corporation can use its elements of power, which are economic, political, monetary. They can use them freely. But we're somehow morally prohibited from using our power, whether economic in terms of boycotts or political. We can't. I don't buy that. That's the rules of engagement of the Republican Party make the rules of engagement in Afghanistan look like the Wild West. My feeling is you're weapons free when you leave the fob. But these guys, I'm going to need you to write a long report before you return fire. We've got to run it up the chain. The JAG wants to look at it.
To your point about Republicans and their hesitancy to go after corporations, but that's a head scratcher to me, Kurt, because many of these corporations collude with they collude with our major institutions in our government, which are all controlled by leftists and the Democrat Party and big tech, and they collude together to push this crazy agenda on this left-wing crazy agenda on the American people. And if we don't, as conservatives, say, wait a second, nope, sorry, we're drawing a line in the sand. I don't support Disney making G-rated television shows with drag queens where my children can watch them on Saturday morning. Like, that's a no from me. And why conservatives are hesitant with that, why conservatives are like they want DeSantis to cease fire because Disney's a corporation and we're the party of low taxes, small government, and that this isn't something that we want to get ourselves entangled with. I think that's wrong, Kurt. I think the Republican Party has evolved in the last 20 years, and we have to take a stand against these people, corporations, big tech, government institutions that hate us.
Well, look, the left has no problem sanctioning corporations.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
But we've somehow convinced ourselves that we're not allowed to influence the nature of our own society. I was on with some communist the other day, and he was going, "Kurt, why do you care if drag queens do stuff?" I go, "Because it's my society, and I get a vote in how it is. Your vote is to have a bunch of weirdos out there twerking in thongs in front of children." Okay, I vote no. And now we're going to see. But you're not going to talk me into not voting. Okay, you're not going to talk me out of pursuing my own interests. I have a right to decide how our society is. And you get the same attitude at schools. Well, you can't ban books. Well, in fact, I'm strongly in favor of banning books in schools. I want all pornography banned, and I'm wondering why no one else, why the leftists doesn't, and I know why. And it's gross. There is no Uh, I refuse to have my. I will not engage in any conservative principle that makes me less free. If you tell me you are bound by a conservative principle that results in you being less free, it is a bad principle, and I'm not going to do it. And the way you get around it is, like, well, why, why don't you live in, let people live and let live? Well, A, I don't get to live. That's a one-way street, and I don't do that. B, I tried tolerance, and you guys tried to have weirdo perverts hit on my kids in school.
I completely,
so I'm not doing
I completely agree with you.
Yes, and I don't care what they think. That the dudes on the show, well, bigots like you, and I'm like, you have to understand, your words are meaningless. You can call me anything you want. It's not going to stop me. Now, 30 years ago, 20 years ago, if someone had come up to you and go, Kurt, you're a racist, I would have stopped and gone, I don't want to be a racist. That's un-American. That's I don't want to do that. Let me do a personal inventory because no one's ever going to call you that unless they're serious, because it's so serious. Maybe I need to look at myself and make sure I'm not doing something wrong. Well, we're a little past that. We're a little past that. I mean, what's the, I love to ask them, okay, leftists, what's the combination of activities that I need to do for you to stop hating me? And there isn't any.
I mean, Kurt, I read a column
friends with them. You just have to beat them.
I mean, I read a column of yours a few years ago, actually, that that talked about this very subject. When the left calls you all of these crazy names, racist, misogynist, whatever, just ignore them. Just laugh at them. Don't let their words affect the way that you operate. Keep moving out, keep drawing fire, keep doing what you can to conserve.
Exactly.
To conserve.
Yes, if they're not calling you names, you're being weak. The funniest thing I love is when guys like Bill Kristol and stuff start getting out there and the leftists attack them anyway. You cannot kiss enough commie butt to make them not hate you.
I mean, Kurt, what?
So even if you were inclined to do, even if you were weak, you shouldn't do it because it doesn't work.
I mean, what happened to guys like George Will and Bill Kristol? As a teenager, I grew up reading those guys.
So did I.
And I don't understand, Kurt. Like, are they doing this just because it's a way for them to make money and the sort of,
yes,
is that it?
No, it's their personal look. It's their identity is based on where they stand in the power and prestige hierarchy within kind of the New York, Washington bubble. And as we've seen from late night shows where you can have 10 late night shows, but all the guys are millionaires who host them. Because if you get 3% of the 100%, you're going to do very, very well. Well, all of them got a small percent. They got their little chunk. They got invited to the right parties and things. That was their life. And they enjoyed the idea that they had a little bit of influence. I mean, frankly, those guys didn't make a lot of money. It's not like they're, tycoons. What they got was prestige. They got, oh, you're George Will. Why? Oh, boy. Okay. So when that got taken away, because normal people like you and I, guys like us, we have accountability. George Will has never had to account for anything. George Will's never had to sit down at a performance review and go, here are the things that you need to accomplish. And you didn't accomplish these things. Okay? You and I, both military guys, we have a mission. You either do it or you don't. You have certain metrics. Have all your guys qualified at the range? Are 95% of your guys not fat? I mean, we had actual numbers, and there were consequences if we didn't get them.
So your point is George Will can be as wrong as often as he wants, and
he lives in a soft world that doesn't have accountability. His thing is, I am George Will. Well, suddenly, a bunch of people said, okay, well, that's not how I live my life, and I'm not interested in what you have to say anymore. I'm going to go with these other people who don't respect you either. And suddenly, they're sitting out there all. What happened to my prestige? And they're mad. This is high school. This is the nerds trying to have revenge because you came in and scammed their, hard six girlfriend.
I found myself Kurt, a little betrayed by Crystal and George Will and
Yeah.
and
Oh,
conservatives
yeah.
of their ilk, because it's like,
No,
I half wonder,
that's
were they
because,
ever conservative, Kurt?
Sean, that's because you're a man. And I mean that in the you're an Army officer. You've been in combat with your guys. You had your buddies back. They had yours, right? You would have run out and probably did run out and grab people under fire. Okay, you understand what loyalty is. It matters to you, not as a pose or a slogan, but as a lifestyle. And I think most of the people listening to it, whether they were in the military or not, your buddy gets in a fight at a bar, you're in,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
Okay. Um, it's a part. You can't imagine not doing that. These are guys who did not come up in that world. They are not in the world of men. They are in the world. I don't even want to say they're in the world of women. They're in a world where the kind of values that we have simply don't exist. George Will goes to bed feeling fine about everything except the fact that nobody cares about him. But, if somebody had started shooting at your platoon and you'd have dropped your weapon and ran, you couldn't live with yourself.
Yeah. I mean, Kurt,
For him, that'd be the first thing he did.
Wow. So let's talk about how you came up, how you got it. I mean, you joined the military. You're an Army officer just like me.
Yep.
You went to war.
Yeah, but I wash trucks.
You say that all the time, but
that's because it's true. I want to make sure everybody knows, here's war heroes, and then I'm way behind them. I was behind the Remps.
Kurt.
I grew up in suburban San Mateo, near San Francisco, back when it was really Brady Bunchy. Okay, it's now the fourth richest county in America, but it wasn't when I was growing up. Everybody had a station wagon. Most moms stayed home. Kids played on the street. I was in the woods every day. Looking back, I was really lucky. Mm-hmm. But I was just, in a lot of ways, very normal. But I was also a Californian, which gives you kind of a sunny optimism. Makes you like punk rock and alternative, which went over like a lead balloon among my military guys. They just thought I was crazy. They're like, look at the LT listening to his loud music. We either got country or we got soul. Country or soul. Because rap wasn't as huge then. But I went to UC San Diego. I was very bored. I come from a military family, mostly Navy. And I just decided I wanted to do something different. I didn't want to go off to law school. My mom had been a lawyer and a judge. Maybe I would do that later. I just wanted to do something. I wanted to serve my country. I mean, I've been a very loud conservative, and I kind of wanted to put my money where my mouth was. So I went in.
Wait, you were even a loud conservative back then?
Oh, yeah. Oh, I was writing for the conservative paper at UC San Diego. I was one of like 8 of them. And I went in as a private. I had a degree, went as a private, 09 Sierra, and I went immediately to officer candidate school. And officer candidate, hardest 14 weeks of my life. I would literally go back to any war, anytime, and it's not even close than OCS. Because, a suburban guy, I never really faced anything super hard. But here's a bunch of people, and they didn't care anything about. I was a top writer. I had a super hot girlfriend. Nobody cared. Right. And I got guys who grew up on farms. I got guys who grew up in the inner city, who'd had tough lives, which I had not. And I had to either perform or fail. And I squeaked through. And they branched me chemical corps, which is funny because math has always been my worst subject. It's the most math intensive of the branches. But I decided, okay, well, I'm going to go with it. I was the number one grad at my chemical course. I wanted the one Ranger slot. Of course, they gave it to the guy who was already airborne, but they sent me to airborne. So I got my jump wings, so I'm jumping out of airplanes 5 times just because I could. And then I go off to Germany. do the platoon leader thing. I'm about to get out. The Gulf War starts. I deploy. And I wash trucks. Chemical decontamination platoon assigned to 7 Corps headquarters, which in retrospect was kind of interesting since I was walking through the command post when radio calls I now read about in history books were made. You know, when General Franks was telling Colonel Holder of the 2nd Armored Cav to slow down to let the artillery and aviation fires attrit the Republican Guard. I'm like listening to these historic radio calls.
Wow.
Which didn't register until like decades later. Then I got out, went to law school, joined the Guard, immediately went to Los Angeles riots. I stayed in the Guard, you know, did my lawyer thing, was a stand-up, and eventually I got found by a guy named Andrew Breitbart. And he said, why don't you write for me?
God.
And I did.
Okay. All right. So let's go back to OCS for a second.
No,
not physically. Like, no, you don't have to actually go through it again. But I remember,
it was bad.
I remember I graduated from Officer Basic Course, and I was there at Fort Benning, and I was at Airborne School. I was like in that like period just before Airborne School had started, so we like were still getting paid, but didn't really have a whole lot to do. So we were basically like
you were
day drinking and like sitting on the porch just watching these poor OCS guys. And they did you have to wear the ascot, like the little you could tell these OCS guys because they got these little shiny helmets on and they got this ascot and they're running around like chickens with their heads cut off, and we're thinking like, so I was ROTC. I mean I didn't have the chops to go to West Point. I probably couldn't hack OCS. Didn't want to do that either. So I went through ROTC, but I remember watching these guys thinking like, oh my God, it just thinking like, it sucks to be them. Thank God I'm not there.
It was so crummy, and it was every day. And I would have been #1 military grad. I would have had the highest academic, except I invented a new way of doing land nav. That wasn't a good way. So I blow load it the first time. You get one redo. The redo is a month later. And if you fail it, you're out.
Oh
so
my
I'm
God.
8 weeks in when I finally do the redo. And of course, I didn't blow night land nav. I did that fine. I blew day land nav, which is the dumbest thing ever. But, you know, I never had the potential for failing. School was always easy for me. Great. Tests were easy. Great. But here, I'm having to do things, you know, and we're peer evaluations. And it was really hard. And it's a constant thing that you can fail. And a third of people did.
Kurt,
but
that's fascinating. I mean, that's fascinating to hear you say that, because I was just talking to one of my daughters about this the other day. I mean, she's trying out for cheerleading now, and like she's super stressed, and she's looking at the whole of cheerleading and thinking, because it's the first time she's ever done it, and she's thinking to herself like, oh my gosh, I don't know how I'm going to do this, like this whole task, right?
Yeah.
And I told her about something that I learned in Ranger School, like you can't eat the elephant all in one sitting. You just got to focus on one task at a time. And I remember as I was telling that story to her, Kurt, I remember exactly what you just described. Like I don't come from a military family. So like when I went to ROTC, it was like drinking from a fire hose, and then went to OBC. But I remember thinking exactly as you described it, like there's a different task every day, lots of different things going on. It felt like, you know, if you close your eyes, you've got like 100 TVs in your brain, all with static, right? You feel overwhelmed all the time. There's a sense of urgency in everything you do.
Yes.
You're being evaluated by your teachers, and you're being evaluated by your peers.
Yep.
And there are pass-fail things, like like legitimately, like if you don't pass this 4-mile run, you're out. You know.
Yep.
I'd never experienced anything like that in my life, and I think.
Huge.
I mean, it sounds like the same is true for you, but I think that shaped the kind of person that I became thereafter.
Completely. I find it very hard to get intimidated by anything.
Really? Really? Yeah. Is that true?
I'm no hero. I'm not particularly brave. I just know what I can do because I did it. Mm-hmm. And you come out of it. I keep saying OCS is the worst thing I ever did. And I'm really glad I did it. I'm glad I did it. Not doing it. That it's in my past and done. But the thing is, you know, and continuing in the Army, people ask me, Kurt, how do you do so many tasks? You write books and you're on TV and you're a lawyer. I don't feel stressed. No one's going to get killed if I screw something up. If I'm late on a town hall column, nobody dies. Nobody loses a limb. The only thing I was afraid of in the Gulf, because I was very young, was I was going to screw some up and get somebody else hurt.
Amen.
Yeah, that weighed on me. And after I came home, and I did nothing. Yeah, I mean, I did nothing. But I did, I saw the first guy die in front of me in the Gulf. But
what was that like? What was that like? How did that happen? You see, this is the thing, Kurt. You're sitting here saying to me like, all I did was wash trucks, but then you say something like that. 99.9% of it. It was the
stupidest traffic accident caused by the bad planning of the officers. Not me, thankfully, but I happened to be the guy who was there when, it all ended. And of course, I'd never seen anybody die before. And I came back from the Gulf, and I got right out of the Army after. I mean, like literally came to Germany, did my checkout, went to Jackson, got released. And I was back in San Mateo. And there's nobody who knows anything about the military there. Everybody I knew had not changed. And I had just gone through a war as a platoon leader. And I wrote my first thing there. I wrote for the Examiner, San Francisco Examiner. I got my first thing published, which was, I'm back in town, and it's kind of blowing my mind. And for a while it did. I think I probably partied a little harder than I should have. I would think back on stuff that happened and just feel nauseous. It was, it was tough. And then I joined the Guard, and I'm not sure why I did, because I didn't like the Army. The officers I worked for did not impress me. And I got in the Guard, and those guys did. And I just went to the funeral of one of my generals this weekend. He, what an incredible leader. He actually took Rick Rescorla's platoon in the first cav in Vietnam. Rescorla left, he took Rescorla's platoon. But even more impressive, he married the Triskelion Amazon chick from Star Trek. Remember her with the silver thing? Angelique Pettyjohn. He married her. General Flynn was a freaking legend.
Talk about coming home and
running up the score.
Yeah.
I mean, this guy had so many medals, they were continued on the next uniform. But I was working with a great guy, and just exactly the kind of leader you wanted. Very flamboyant. And then I went to another leaders event, became like a distinguished Eagle Scout, which apparently not a lot of people get Eagle Scout, not a lot of people get this. And he's very quiet and and smart and cerebral. And I just surrounded by these great leaders. And it was, I was like, I want to be like this guy. Well, I don't want to be him. I want to take all the good things that I see in him that I can use and use them. And I did. As a leader, I stole shamelessly from other people.
I was just going to ask you, what do you think, what are your big takeaways? I mean, this is a broad question, just in terms of leadership. And because clearly, Kurt, you've experienced a lot, man. I mean, just, you make a joke about it, like I wash trucks, but the reality is when you volunteer to serve this country, you don't know how you're going to serve.
No, you don't.
You don't know what you're going to do.
But I'm not ashamed of it. I just don't want anyone to ever say, Kurt, you're inflating what you did. I did my job and I was good at it. But I'm not Audie Murphy. I didn't jump on a grenade. Nobody shot at me. But I was very good at what I did. I think when you're looking at leadership, the first thing you have to do is you have to not want to command people, in the sense that you don't get off telling people what to do. It always bothered me to tell other Americans what to do. I knew I had to. I always felt, you have the eagle. I always felt I was leasing that. That's why I always get uncomfortable when people call me Colonel now, because I'm not colonelling. Okay, I never identified with the rank. That was just a tool I had to do my job. And I loved organizing things. I loved planning and execution. And when everything worked and you got your guys going as a team, because I would be the general's fix-it guy. Schlichter, go over to 185 and fix it. Okay. And I go in and I meet everybody, and it was an exercise in how to fix something and how to make it great. And any group, there's nothing I hate more than you hear a leader go, "Well, those troops are rag bags." No, their leaders are rag bags. Put me in there. I will find the right guys, and we will make them a great unit, and we will expect excellence. And
so much of what I learned, Kurt, so much of what you're saying resonates with my own personal experience as well. I mean, look, there are times where, when you're getting shot at and you have to make a decision and you point and like you say, go, right? Yeah. This is what needs to be done in this moment. And there's no questioning what I'm saying right now, because this is what we got to do to survive. But I agree with you that what I learned over time as an officer in the Army was that the job is less about telling people what to do, but more about decentralizing any sort of authority that you have and giving your subordinate leaders the ability to make decisions that they thought were in the best interest of the mission and their men.
Yeah, and I was building teams at every level.
Exactly.
And, there are various kinds of leaders. There's some guys who are the logistician, and they're very, very, very careful about putting all the pieces in place. There's the flamboyant guy with a saber, follow me. I was the team builder. I would go and I would curate my staff. If there was a guy who wasn't working out, "You're fired, you idiot." It's, "Hey, Major, your career progression, you need to go over to the G4 at division, because that's the next step." And of course, it was true, but it was also useful because then I could backfill in with somebody who could do better. And I would shamelessly build incredible teams out of people who didn't like me. I mean, my sergeant major freaking hated me as a captain. He was op sergeant.
Why?
He was an E8 there. He just thought I was the biggest jerk on earth, a loudmouth, an idiot, just wouldn't listen to anybody. I it was a little unfair, but he gets his sign. But he a total pro, and you never saw us not together. I mean, we were everywhere, all over the place. I'm never in our office. I thought that if you want to lead, you need to be the guy who goes down the motor pool, squiggles up underneath with a specialist changing the oil and go, "Hey, specialist, how do you change an oil? How do you change oil?" And they'll look at you like you're crazy for a second. And they go, "Well, sir, this is how you do it. You do it this way, but you got to make sure that you drain the oil out this way. Otherwise, you're going to." And he'll tell you all about his thing, and you'll learn. And then he'll go, "You know what? The boss was under a truck with me." My gosh, I remember taking. I would always go through the cooks. Cooks loved me because I cared, and I would go through and talk to them about what they needed and stuff. I remember one of the proudest things was, I remember once I learned about the power of battalion command then. I'm sitting there, and of course I eat last. Me and Sergeant Major kind of jockey to be the last guy. I get my scrambled eggs, and I look at him, and I'm not even thinking. I go, too bad there's no ketchup, because I always put ketchup on my eggs. And I just said out, and I thought nothing else. "Sean, for the next 2 years, I never did not have a bottle of Heinz ketchup there waiting for me."
That's amazing. Yeah, that's awesome.
By the way, greatest food service section. Unbelievable. The guards guys are amazing. And when I left, they spray painted a ketchup bottle gold and gave it to me. And I love that thing like I love my saber.
Of all the medals that you have, where does that rank?
About number one.
I bet. Man, like you're I mean, I'm sitting here listening to you thinking, and I don't know why it's the first time I'm thinking about this in a long time, but I miss having, a senior non-commissioned officer with me. I miss that relationship.
Look, I like Donald Trump. I'm hard on Donald Trump because I think no one else is. I've never experienced anyone who needs a command sergeant major more than Donald Trump.
Oh my gosh.
He's the guy who would literally say, "Sir, can I talk to you?" And he'd shut the door. He goes, "Sir, you are blanking up." And, you have a choice then. You can get your ego in a stick, or you can say, "What do you think I'm doing wrong, Sergeant Major? well, you're doing this, this, and this. And, 9 times out of 10, he's right. They give you, I had 17, 18 years in when I had battalion command, but they gave me a guy with 30 who knows nothing but how to lead soldiers at the soldier level. And if you don't use that tool, and every one of your tools, your chaplain, your JAG, they're useful for something, even if it's a chalk block. They gave me as a battalion commander and later as an acting brigade commander, I had like a town, a mobile city that fulfilled all the functions of a city. And I had all the various cast of characters. And I just, tried to use them.
Well, I just know that there's no way in hell I would have been able to do the job if I didn't have somebody, it's just for the viewers and listeners who are going to listen to this. A senior non-commissioned officer is somebody that basically is your shadow, who has a hell of a lot more experience than you do, been in the Army a hell of a lot longer than you. Like when I was a young platoon leader, my platoon sergeant had 15 to 20 years in.
Yeah, that's right.
And all of my platoon sergeants were incredible. And there were a great many times that I would, we'd talk after hours or after we got back off of a patrol in Afghanistan where I'd say, like, how did that go? What could I do better? Or I don't really know what the hell I'm doing right now. Like, what's the right answer here?
And they'll tell you.
Yes, and they will.
They'll tell you.
I miss that. I miss that relationship in life. You know, I do.
No, that's true. I look back on my Army time, and it was a different time. I've been out 8.5 years now. So it's a different time. And I'm in a different place, but every once in a while I look back and go, gosh, some of that stuff is pretty cool. How many other people have the experience of leading a convoy of armored vehicles across the plains?
Not many.
I've done it. And it's badass.
Yeah,
and it is. And there's that 1% overcomes the 99% that's sitting in briefings while people are talking about, their PT score, PT pass rate. And the general's going, okay, is everybody donated to the officer club? That nonsense. That 1%. That's
it's a tragedy, Kurt. It's a tragedy. I mean, there's a lot of tragedies associated with military service. I mean, and especially when you talk about like the context of coming home and guys struggle and there's an adjustment. And you sounded like you had a little adjustment as well.
No, I had easy compared to guys who had real problems.
Well,
I was just alone.
I just think it's a tragedy that our country doesn't fully appreciate what it means to serve. And I'm not, this isn't a negative thing. Like, in a free society, you want people to feel like they're safe. And I volunteered for the job. I would do it again in a second. I'm not a victim of any of this. I'm a volunteer. I love this country. I just wish, I think guys would have a little bit easier of a job coming home, Kurt, if, the people that enjoy freedom on a day-to-day basis or more in tune with the people who protect it. Because now, you got guys that come home, to your point, right, of how many people have led an armored convoy, in combat and it's badass. It's amazing. There's a ton, as someone who's an officer, right, I know all of the tasks that go into planning that, right? From being a logistician and like the land navigation, the actual executive leadership of being in charge of people. You'd be hard pressed to find anybody in the business world, if they haven't served, that understands any of that.
No, people don't have an understanding of how hard things are.
That's right.
Everything is hard.
It's true.
Moving my battalion to the field, just as a guard guy for a weekend, that's like literally picking up a city and a small town and moving.
Yeah, I know. Exactly.
And you have all those same issues, everything from toilets to gasoline. How are these guys going to eat? Where are they going to sleep? What happens if somebody gets hurt? How about if somebody's kid falls off his bike, breaks his arm? How are you going to get him back? It's a huge deal, and we learn to do it. And, we're pretty proud of the fact that we can do it because a lot of people can't. And I just, I don't think civilians will ever fully appreciate it. I think one of the problems is, and we're seeing it with the military, can't make their numbers. And I think it's largely because the senior leadership's pretty much a disgrace. we keep hearing about, well, we're having trouble meeting our numbers, but it's not wokeness. It's wokeness. Wokeness. So the military is largely a family organization. It's you do it because you talk to your uncle or your dad or a neighbor or somebody. In most cases, not all cases, but most. And they said you should, do a hitch in the Marines or join the Air Force, do whatever. And right now, I know from the people I'm talking to, people are going, don't do it. You cannot rely on the senior leadership to have your back. Everything from COVID. I mean, the betrayal of COVID. So manifestly stupid. You take the youngest, healthiest cohort in America and treat them like they're a bunch of elderly hospice patients with masks and the rest of this. You're going to take a vaccine. The thing that never stops ticking me off is I have yet to see any of the generals just pulling their thing off, going, "I won't be a part of it. I'm out."
Kurt, I could not agree with you more. I think that I saw General Austin, Secretary of Defense Austin, said something a month ago that he has no regrets about the withdrawal of Afghanistan.
None, huh?
None. I mean, I'm sorry, but
zero, huh?
But how, as a leader, the leaders? I mean, look, I don't want to be one of those guys that was like back in my day. Because General Austin was a 2-star in charge of the 10th Mountain Division when we were there. I had nothing but high regard for him, and I respect all that he's done in the military. But what the hell kind of statement is that?
On my lawyer's side, I represented the families of one of the Marines killed, and I grabbed another lawyer who's also a combat arms colonel, and we attended the briefing that the Marines gave on the tactical situation to the family. Right, they sent out an 06 and an 05 JAG, maybe an 04, to do an actual briefing. All rehearsed, all the families got the same day. They had video and everything. They wanted to show the families what happened on the ground there. And we got asked to be a part of it, which the Marines did not like initially. Last thing you want is 2 colonels sitting there looking over your shoulder. The takeaway for me was the amazing performance of the Marines in a situation they never should have been put in. They were put in a situation where there was no infrastructure built to provide distance or protection between unvetted Afghans. And of course, the guy with the bomb came up, got close, blew up, killed 13. Never should have happened. We knew we were not, if we knew we were leaving Bagram 6 months ago, I don't understand why it's not like the United States was shy about spending money to build things. Why the proper infrastructure wasn't built that could have protected our guys. Not all of them, but most of them. And their actions beforehand, the Marines were incredibly brave. The actions after the attack were pretty much textbook, the way they evacuated the wounded and stuff. The question I asked, I saw that there were no officers killed, no commissioned officers. And I said to this colonel, "Where the hell were the officers?" And he goes, "Colonel, let me show you. Platoon leader, 20 meters away, wounded. Company commander, 40 meters away, wounded. Battalion commander, 80 meters away, wounded." And I said, okay. They were where they needed to be to oversee that operation. So I was very impressed by the performance of the troops. The performance at the strategic level, the senior level, just shameful. He doesn't regret anything. I'd be relieved.
And look, you read, God, there's so much here. Or how about like the tragedy of, obviously, the 13 that were KIA there on the withdrawal, Obviously a tragedy of epic proportions.
Yes.
Also the tactical mistake of killing that entire Afghan family in a drone strike. Look, Kurt, I was in Paktika province in Burmel. Our mission was very simple: close with and destroy the enemy. That's it. Like, find Osama bin Laden if you can, but kill as many of them as possible coming in from
Good
Pakistan. And it really was, Kurt. I mean, we, as horrible as that deployment was, and as much combat that we saw, it really was a textbook light infantry mission. But even in the midst of all of that, Kurt, we never did anything like that. We never made a mistake like that. So,
Look.
and it's not like the withdrawal of Afghanistan, as you said, was a secret, and then in the 6 months leading up to it, I think in April of that year leading up to the collapse of Afghanistan, you have Milley on Capitol Hill talking, well, I'd sure like to know more about white rage. Dude, seriously?
Look,
Seriously?
I looked at how this thing was planned, and I'm thinking, one of my staffs could have planned that whole deployment out in a weekend. I mean, not because it was easy, just because we knew how to plan stuff. But you give me 6 months and 500 guys to plan an operation? Holy cow! I'd had an op order this thick and you'd have rehearsed it 10 times. I mean, it would have been to the gnat's rear end. Not this clusterfuck that we watched on TV. I'm like, what happened to my army?
I mean, that was my next question is, what's going on in the military right now?
Oh, it's a disaster.
I mean, you talked about it being woke. Okay, so we've got massive recruiting problems. There's a war raging in Ukraine right now with Russia. It seems to be escalating if you're paying attention, and I know you are, escalating in a very concerning way every single day.
Yes.
You've got China potentially maybe invading Taiwan, the world seems to be going to hell in a handbasket. You've got all of our enemies established in this economic brick where they're trying to depose the U.S. dollar as the predominant currency in the world. It seems like the U.S. is taking it on all fronts. And as you mentioned, like wokeness is a problem.
It's a disaster.
And I think, Kurt, here's the issue, and that really very few people are talking about. And I know you'll get this better than me. But when I came into the military, we were a Cold War force, right? That evolved very rapidly into brigade combat teams to fight an asymmetric threat and counterinsurgency. But now the threat has changed. And for example, so what does that look like for a guy like me in the infantry? We did not have Stinger missiles direct support to battalions. So if we're fighting a conventional force with helicopters, what does a light infantry platoon like mine do other than get lit up?
Yeah,
right?
You get lit up.
Are we evolving our force at all? It doesn't seem like we are.
I don't think we've got a force that matches the threat. Now, I went to Ukraine 4 times. I trained them. When I was in Kosovo, we had a Ukrainian team with us, Polish-Ukrainian battalion team. And I respect the Ukrainians. They're tough dudes. And they put up a better fight than I expected. And the Russians a worse fight than I expected. But you look at some of the stuff that's going on, and these are the lessons we didn't need to know. I knew this. I mean, all of us knew this stuff. The sheer logistic drain. If you're in contact with enemy armored forces, you're going to fire literally every shell you can get your hands on. And I think right now we're kind of parceling it out. There's 3 ways you can go. You can go, hey, I don't want a war with Russia, and browbeat Ukraine into coming to a peace treaty. And it's going to be on terms they don't like, but war's not in our interest. I'm an American, blah, blah, blah. Or you can give them every single thing they want so that they can actually fight and maybe take their territory back. The problem with that, of course, is that it drains our stocks. And I don't know how drained our stocks are, but I'm not optimistic. Or you can do the worst possible thing, which is just give them enough to keep fighting it out like the Western Front in World War I, which is what they're doing now. I know that they're training up forces. This is all open source stuff. They're training up forces using Bradleys. They'll get some M1s also to basically do a spring offensive. I don't think they have the combat power to push the Russians out. Russians always get beaten at the beginning. Then they fire all the lousy generals, get new ones, rebuild, get better equipment. The Ukrainians destroyed a ton of equipment, but it was all crummy. The next stuff's going to be brand new, and it ain't going to be crummy. And the Russians are going to learn. And as Napoleon and Hitler both found out, when Russians are on the ground, that's when they're the most dangerous. Because they're going to get back up.
You are 100% correct. This next spring offensive is going to be the real critical fight.
Yeah, I'm on the Ukrainian
Russians,
side. If you have to pick a side,
of course. Yeah, I mean, obviously, I I think that America has some very grave concerns that we need to be dealing with here in our country.
Yep.
But you know that Russia this spring, when this next spring offensive takes place, they're marching into Ukraine with 500,000 Russians. You just know that's happening.
There's going to be a lot more troops, and they're not going to make the same stupid mistakes the first guys did. The Red Army, after 43, 44, was significantly, starting 43 when they won Stalingrad, was exponentially better than the one that Hitler hit in the initial invasion. And it went all the way to Berlin. Look, I'm not a Putin apologist or a fan of the Russians, who I still know how to kill a motor rifle regiment. Okay, I'm a Cold War guy who was in Germany. But,
we know how to identify what T-70 tanks and blow their tops off, which
is the one with the antenna. Kill that.
Yes, one. Exactly.
But I have grave doubts that there are a lot of tough guys here in America with Ukrainian flag emojis who are writing some pretty big checks that the Ukrainians have to cash. Now, the Ukrainians got to do what the Ukrainians got to do, but Americans got to do what I'm an American. My interest is that America's interests are pursued, and they may diverge with Ukraine's.
I mean, and look, Kurt, if fighting must happen, obviously Ukrainians fighting the Russians so that Americans don't have to, okay, obviously, I prefer that, but also I don't like the idea of investing over $100 billion in a country when we still haven't evacuated all Americans from Afghanistan. I just don't understand what seems like a rush and clamoring into another fight.
I think a lot of Republicans are comfortable with that from the Cold War, notably guys who never served. But when McConnell gets up and says, there's no higher priority than Ukraine, well, I beg to differ. I got a lot of higher priorities than Ukraine. And I'm not anti-Ukraine. I hope they win. But I'm an American. That's where my interest is. And, you're not going to shame me into putting Ukraine first.
I mean, look, it just came out today that more Americans than ever before have more credit card debt than they do in savings.
We've got an economic disaster going on. We have a senile old pervert as a president. The only guy who's happy about Joe Biden, besides Dr. Jill, is Jimmy Carter, because now he's not going to die the worst American president in the last century.
So I got to ask, how did you meet? So I don't want to skip over so much I want to talk to you about, Kurt, but I also want to be respectful of your time. How did you meet Andrew Breitbart?
Well, there was somebody I kind of knew who he was. I wasn't really involved. I was reading a lot on the interwebs. And someone from law school grew up near him and said, you really got to meet this Andrew Breitbart guy. And we got hooked up on Facebook. And we spent a lot of time talking about 80s music and Mexican food. Yeah. And then one day I knew he was doing Big Hollywood. And I saw a story that they were going to Hollywood was going to open up and premiere the new Star Trek movie. They're going to do it in Kuwait for the troops. And I thought, well, that's a positive story. It's very important to reinforce positive behavior. You criticize all you want, but if you can pin a medal on somebody, that's, so I go to Andrew, hey, you might want to get somebody to write about this because, you want to reward the good. He said, why don't you write about it? Fine. I had been writing. I wrote at college. I did some freelance, and I had been a stand-up comic. I write the article. He sends me a writer's packet. It's so early, it doesn't even have a non-disclosure agreement, which is why years later, when Steve Bannon left Breitbart to go be on the campaign, I got a ton of calls from people about Steve Bannon because I'm the only guy who could legally talk about him. Because I didn't have an NDA.
Bannon was at I forgot about that.
Bannon was at Breitbart after Andrew died. And for anybody out there thinking, oh, he was murdered. No, He had a heart condition. I had lunch with him 2 weeks before, and I told him he looked terrible. He needed to slow down, and he literally worked himself to death. But he did have a heart condition, and he was not murdered. He worked himself to death for us.
Kurt, all of this was like a little bit before my time, in the sense that I was in the Army. I got out of the Army in 2010. Outlaw Platoon came out in February of 2012, and I had just started paying attention to, guys like Andrew Breitbart and his whole crop of like, now they're like all household names in conservatism
I was doing a online radio show with Stage Right, who was Larry O'Connor.
Yeah.
A guy, you may have heard of him, Ben Shapiro.
Yeah.
And we would do the hour of hate every Thursday night, just the three of us for about 50 people online. And, I remember when Ben got his first sub gig, he was like, hey, we have a substitute on the radio. And then Larry, of course, is now at WMAL. Ben, of course, is Ben. I guest host on Salem and stuff. And it's just, Dana Lash was there, Michael Walsh, just this whole Derek Hunter, all this crew of folks. And we were just out there fighting the fight.
So all of these people, right? Like I'm like paying. I just tap into all of this. I just start watching.
Yeah,
watching what Andrew Breitbart is.
Scene.
Yeah, 2012. Yeah. But the day I was on Opie and Anthony when the show still existed, my first experience in Sirius XM radio, and I'm on talking about the book with Opie and Anthony, and we get the breaking news that Andrew Breitbart had died that day.
Yep.
And
March 1, 2012.
And now, I often wonder, it seemed to me, and now Kurt, I don't know this, but it seemed to me he was the very first conservative that, well, I might not be the very first one, but it seemed to me he was the very first conservative that understood the cultural place that we were in as conservatives, and on the risk that our country faced back then. Well,
he did.
Now that we face now.
But he also understood how technology and the internet could affect it. And he was a master showman, just amazing guy. Crazy. I mean, he's nuts. He was a visionary. I know a lot of leaders. I don't know a lot of visionaries, but he was a visionary because he saw things no one else could see.
Well, I mean, seems like an amazing guy. I wish I would have had the opportunity to meet him. And he certainly, man, you're one of those people. You're one of the people that's like out there, like a household name in conservatism now. And so you're writing these Kelly Turnbull novels, right? What are you on, 7 now?
Yep, I'm writing number 8 as we speak.
It's like absolutely ridiculous.
Hundreds of thousands.
I know. I've have you really? Like, I was going to ask you how's it going? Like,
people are dying for them.
I mean, I remember I read the first few of them actually, and the breakdown of the divided states and the red and the blue states. I just thought, like, first of all, your first book came out years ago, so
2016.
Do you take some pride in knowing that
I predicted this?
Yeah, a lot of I was just going to say a lot of this.
I'm not happy about it. I'm a little smug, but I'm not happy about it.
So these hardcore Democrat cities, Kurt, are like some of the Democrat towns that Kelly Turnbull's going through. I mean, it's like, it's crazy.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
I just extrapolated out, and I thought I was being ridiculous when I was having people arrested for pronoun crimes. It's not ridiculous.
It's not ridiculous anymore.
No, and now I got to top myself.
Yeah. Well, all you got to do is just figure out where we're going to go from here.
Yeah. I'm just trying not to be overtaken by reality.
So where do we go from here? Can conservatives actually conserve something? Can we turn the tide? Look, have we ever really though?
No, we have, and we do regularly. The Reagan Revolution. The Tea Party revolution, while not completely successful, set back the enemy. Trump set back the enemy. I think they've gone too far with the attack on kids, because I think that's bringing people who just prefer not to be political at all into the fight. And you can see the enemy's getting desperate. They are literally against free speech. They are literally for jailing their opponents. These are stupid people. Remember, our enemy, our ruling class enemy, is not this group of accomplished Blofeld Bond villains stroking their cats. Okay, they're Woody Allen-like nerds with creepy taste, and unfortunately, I think a lot of them have never been in a fist fight, and they don't understand that you can't go into a bar and walk up to somebody and push him, and he's like, "Oh, excuse me," push him again. Hey, stop pushing me. Stop pushing me. Eventually, things are going to get ugly. And remember that Republicans riot at the ballot box. They will elect harder and harder people. I think they're terrified of Ron DeSantis because I think they can beat Trump. But if they can't beat Ron DeSantis is also very disciplined. And we've seen that he just goes right for the jugular. He finds the decisive point. I mean, with Disney, he didn't fool around. I'm taking your government, your special privileges. And Disney's like, huh? Well, you can't do that. Well, I've done it. And then they try and play games, and they're going to find that's not going to work.
Yeah, it does seem. I mean, DeSantis was an incredible governor in Florida. Do you think that? I mean, it seems like President Trump is pulling away, at least in the polling. And I'll tell you something else that rubs me the wrong way about DeSantis, Kurt. Like, I mean, you're clearly campaigning. Like his response the other day, like, well, I'm not actually in the race yet. And that might be true. But I thought, like, why are people endorsing you then? You know?
Hopeful. I think
just like I guess my point is like if you're gonna run, just get in.
Well, he's got a few things he's got to do, like get his resign to run law thrown out, which he's going to do.
I guess that's true. Yeah,
there's
that's
also,
true.
Unfortunately, there are also legal considerations, as you well know about. If you are campaigning, suddenly you have a whole bunch of legal obligations that you don't otherwise. The other thing is, Trump really wants him to start, and I tend to do what my opponent doesn't want me to do. There's a reason Trump wants him in the race, and I think it'd make him a easier target. But it's good. Look, I want a brutal primary. I want a tough primary that has the toughest winner coming out and the one most likely to win. And I'm not sure who that's going to be. Trump can certainly win. I think Trump's numbers peaked after this bogus indictment. It is bogus. It's a disgrace. All of this stuff is a disgrace. I think they're coming down a little now. Look, Trump's not going to get handed this. He's got to go and earn it. He's got to take it. And there's a good chance he will. I don't count DeSantis out anymore. I mean, in 2008, Hillary was where Trump is. Barack Obama is where DeSantis is. And we never had a President Hillary.
Mm-hmm.
So look, here's what I'm going to say. People go, well, who are you for? I'm going to vote for whoever wins the nomination. I'm in the game. I'm going to support the winner like I always do, because that's what I am. I'm a Republican. Now, there are some people who are Trump voters and not Republicans, and they won't vote for anybody but Trump. And there are some never Trump people who call themselves Republicans, but they won't vote for Trump. And I don't get that. I don't get either of that. I'm going to vote for the winner. And I'm going to vote in the primary for the person I think is most likely to win in the general.
Can I ask you one more political question?
Of course.
What do you make of Kennedy's candidacy on the Democrat side? I'll tell you what I think.
Oh, well, tell me.
I think he's look, there are obviously going to be plenty of places where I disagree with him. And in fact, I know several places from at least a policy standpoint where he and I wouldn't see eye to eye. But I like a lot of the things that he says, and he seems like an old school Democrat, like my grandfather would really like, And I mean, I think his position on vaccines, I mean, he seems sort of like a Democrat populist in a lot of ways.
I think Democrat populism and Republican populism have more in common than we think. I have probably my oldest friend was very much, kind of an RFK kind of guy. And he now calls himself a conservative, but he hasn't changed any of his views. Um, I think there is a sense that there is an in crowd and an out crowd, and I think that's an accurate sense. Uh, the people in charge who inherited their power, they certainly didn't earn it. They've never built anything. The example I always use is, the World War II generation. They beat Hitler, they beat the Depression. The '60s, they defeated the Democrat racial oppression structure through the civil rights movement. They put a man on the moon. Those are pretty good achievements, right? You want those on the wall. Those are pretty good. What's this one given us? Iraq, Wall Street meltdown, and perpetual masking and grinder. Okay, this is not a ruling class that's got a bunch of accomplishments. What they have is a bunch of power, and that's all they care about. I mean, their attack on free speech, which they don't deny now, their attack on objectivity in the media, their attack on any time they consider any pursuit of our interests or attempt to be part of our own governance as inherently illegitimate, and that's not going to work for me, and I don't think it's going to work for most people. And I think I think a backlash is coming. I think there can be a gentle backlash where we kind of move back to a free society where everybody's rights are respected and everybody can speak freely, et cetera, and so forth. Or we're going to have a strong man, a real authoritarian, not one of the fake authoritarians they keep talking about. And I don't prefer that, but I'm not going to live under leftist tyranny.
Wow. Well, Kurt, I mean, thanks, man, for coming on. I mean, if you're watching this or listening to this, I mean, obviously everybody that's watching this show probably already knows who you are, but you've got to go out and get Kurt's fiction. I mean, you write nonfiction too. How many books total do you have?
You'll Be Back is the last one. I don't have another project going. I'm writing the 8th Kelly Turnbull now, but I don't have a nonfiction going. But you can find me every week, Monday, Wednesday, Thursday on Town Hall.
Yeah, read your Town Hall columns, buy your books. The Kelly Turnbull novels are really cool. They're fun. Give you a glimpse of the future if you continue to be right about things. And where can people find you, Kurt?
On Twitter is the best place, at Kurt Schlichter.
Yeah, you got to check out Kurt's tweets. They're savage. I mean, your perspective, man, I read it all the time. I read your columns all the time. I appreciate you coming on and giving us your perspective, man. Thanks, Kurt.
Thanks for having me, man.
All right. Take care, brother.